How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today we are checking out the RushFPV's 5.8 gigahertz RHCP, or right-hand circular polarized cherry antenna. It has a 1.2 dBi gain. The S11 SWR is 1.4 max and 1.1 minimum. The bandwidth is 5600 to 6000. So 5.8 gigahertz, and the axial ratio is 1 dB. Now, it comes in a case like this, just like that, and inside we have the pamphlet, where you can roll it out, and also it will contain 2 cherry antennas and 2 connectors. So you get 2 of these antennas. I have one loose and I have one already connected to my quadcopter here. And you also get a bag of goodies, which contains a bunch of screws and some nuts and a couple of connectors, so you can put your antenna in it and connect it to the standoff on a small quadcopter, like a 3-inch quadcopter on the rear standoff. So the antenna will be coming out and you can connect the connector to the VTX just like that. So the total length of the antenna on this UFL version will come in at 80.2 millimeters, so 80 millimeters. And the width of the antenna casing itself comes in at 16.5 millimeters. And the height of the antenna casing will come in at 13 millimeters. Okay guys, so both of the antennas and both of the connectors in this plastic bag will come in at 5 grams. So each one roughly will weigh in at about 2.5 grams. Now, I found the perfect quadcopter that has a UFL connector on its VTX, and the VTX also came with smart audio and 4 levels of power output. It is the Eachine Wizard X140, which originally came with a dipole copper antenna. So it was a perfect quadcopter to upgrade to the Rush cherry antenna. Now, the cherry antenna is fairly long, so I've had to rotate the VTX 90 degrees so to somewhat shorten the antenna length protruding out from the quadcopter, because the UFL connector on the VTX was placed towards the rear of the quadcopter, so too much antenna would be sticking out. So it would have been better if it could have been rotated a full 180 degrees, but the wiring harness for the VTX was too short to do that. So 90 degrees is good enough. Now, usually on most builds, the VTX is able to be rotated to meet the needs of the antenna placement, unlike a flight controller. It just goes in one way. So keep that in mind if you are thinking of checking out this Rush cherry antenna for yourself. So another perfect application for me is to upgrade the dipole antenna on my Emax Hawk 5 with the cherry antenna, since we get 2 of these cherry antennas in the plastic container. And the Emax Hawk 5 comes with a dipole antenna as well. So the radiation pattern on a dipole antenna is kind of like the shape of a donut, if you will, with the antenna in the middle. So the strength is mostly on its sides and not so much on the top and on the bottom area. So it is good if you are just cruising. But the radiation pattern on the Rush cherry antenna, since it is a circular polarized antenna, is kind of like the shape of an apple. So it is more of a rounded pattern to better suit a freestyle type flying style with less dead spots on the top and on the bottom. So the Rush cherry antenna comes in the MMCX connector version, straight or 90 degree angled, and also with the SMA connector version, straight or 90 degree angled, and with the UFL or the IPEX connector version, which I have here today. So this one that comes with the UFL connector also comes with this thing called the UFL lock. It is a metal bracket that is slotted to reinforce the IPX or the UFL connector. So just slide the bracket out and connect the UFL connector, and then push the bracket back in to lock the UFL connector. So when it is pulled out, it is a bit loose around the rim of the connector, and when it is pushed in, it kind of tightens or chokes the rim of the connector, so it helps to keep the UFL connector in place. Now, it doesn't lock the connectors, it just squeezes it, so it is harder for it to come off. And we've all experienced a burnt out VTX or two after a crash due to the antenna flying off or getting dislodged while the battery was still connected. Yeah, the walk of shame is even longer then. So it is a welcome safety addition by all means. So I was out in the field yesterday with the Eachine Wizard X140 with the original dipole antenna to set a basis to this test. So we'll see a before installing the Cherry antenna test flight and after installing the Cherry antenna test flight. So let's take a look and see if the Cherry antenna makes any difference. Okay, so we are starting off the test flight with the original dipole antenna first, and the VTX is set to 25 milliwatts. So pretty good video so far since we are nearby. The original antenna was pretty decent. I did a lot of flying with it and I really liked it. Now we're going to head on over to the 150 meter bush, which was formerly the 100 meter bush. There it is on the left. And the second bush is now 200 meters away. And we get some major static there. So turn around, come back home. So the maximum distance with the original dipole antenna with the VTX set to 25 milliwatts was slightly over 150 meters and less than 200 meters. So let's go ahead and bring it in for a landing and change the VTX power output to the second level, which is 100 milliwatts. All right, so here we go with the milliwatt setting to the second power level, which is 100 milliwatts on this VTX. Even though the on-screen display showed 200 milliwatts, this VTX's second level power is 100 milliwatts. So here come the 200 meter bush, and we can safely cross the 200 meter bush with the VTX set to 100 milliwatts with a dipole antenna, and we're pushing it even further away. So pretty decent setup with the dipole antenna. It's pretty decent. Okay, so that was about almost 300 meters and we saw some static, so I turned around. So we're gonna head back and then change over to the third power output for this VTX, which is going to be 200 milliwatts. And the OSD is going to say 500 milliwatts, but this VTX's third power setting will be 200 milliwatts. And I flipped over here. So let's go ahead and set it first. So there you go. It is showing 500 milliwatts, but the actual milliwatt here set to the VTX is 200 milliwatts. Okay. There we go. We are ready to go. All right, so here's the flight with the VTX set to the third highest level with a dipole antenna. So this is the 200 milliwatt power output from the VTX. And there's the 150 meter bush. And here comes the 200 meter bush. And we should be close to 300 meters. There's a little bit of snow. Not enough for me to turn around, so I'm heading towards that road a little bit more, and we get a little bit more static. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn around. So it did go further than the second power setting, which is 100 milliwatt. So the 200 milliwatt power output setting, even with the dipole antenna, did make a difference. It's not bad. So even with the dipole antenna, I had no problems flying with this quadcopter. Right, so I'm bringing it in for a landing, and we're going to switch it over to the highest level, which is 300 milliwatts on this VTX, even though I'm going to set it to 800 milliwatts on the OSD menu. All right, so let's go ahead and check it out with the highest level power output, the fourth level, which is 300 milliwatts. So we should be pretty good here at 150 meters away. And the 200 meter distance mark there. And right about 300 meter distance mark here, we get a little bit of breakup, but we'll push it a little bit further and try to hit that road, which is close to 400 meters. And we skim the road and turn around. There's a little bit of static. So that is about its maximum distance with the dipole antenna to safely fly around with the VTX power output set to the highest milliwatt, which is 300 milliwatt. So I go towards the back of myself, and the car is in between myself, which I am turned the opposite way around, so my body is in the way as well. So we'll see some breakups right here coming towards the car. And I'll do a altitude check as well. So I'll go flying above myself because the dipole antenna's radiation pattern is kind of shaped like a donut. So below the antenna and above the antenna is the dead spots or the null spots. So I'm trying to find some static while I'm flying over myself, and there's a little bit of static there. I think the dipole antenna did pretty good, actually, because this VTX has 4 power outputs. So anytime you have a VTX that can go beyond 25 milliwatts, you're pretty good. All right, so that will be our first flight test with dipole antenna. All right, guys, so here we are on the next day because I had to go home and change out the antenna. So here we are flying with the RushFPV's Cherry antenna with the power output set to 25 milliwatts. And there's a couple of birds flying around. Yeah, there's the 150 meter bush. And here comes the 200 meter bush. And we get a breakup just about the same distance as we did with the dipole antenna. So not a big difference with the Rush Cherry antenna. So let's go ahead and bring it in and set our VTX power output level to the second power setting, which will be 100 milliwatts. All right, so here we go. Even though the OSD says 200, it is actually 100 milliwatts on this VTX. So we should see a little bit better signal, less static with the power output at 100 milliwatts with this cherry antenna. So let's check it out here. 150 meter bush, 200 meter bush. And here we go further away in almost 300 meters. So that is not bad. There's a little bit of static here and there. So let's go slightly beyond 300 and somewhat meters here, and we are able to do so even on our second power output setting, which is 100 milliwatts. So it is doing a lot better than the original dipole antenna for sure, with the power output slightly raised, even just with 100 milliwatts. So it does make a difference what kind of antenna you use. And now remember, the radiation pattern on this circular polarized antenna is shaped like an apple. So it is more of a rounded radiation pattern. So I'm above myself trying to get some static. But as you can see, it fares a lot better than the dipole antenna. I'm not getting any static above myself. So better for freestyle flying for sure. Right, so bring it in for a landing and switch the VTX power output to the third level, which will be 200 milliwatts, even though the OSD menu says 500. Okay, don't forget to set it. All right, so power output set to 200 milliwatts now. So let's go ahead and check it out. $150, no problem here. 200, no problem here. 300, no problem here. And heading towards the 400 meter road mark. And not much problem here as well. So definitely, oh, there was a little bit of static there, but definitely a lot better video reception than with the dipole antenna. Does make a little difference, yeah. So it is worth switching out your original dipole antenna, which is okay for flying around, 100 to 200 meters. If your VTX power output is set to higher than 25 milliwatts, but you don't have that radiation pattern in the shape of an apple, if you will. You'll get a radiation pattern that is shaped like a donut. So probably the distance really doesn't make a huge difference. As you can see here, we made a little bit better progress, but the overall radiation pattern is round. So when you're doing freestyle and doing flips and loops and stuff like that, you get a clearer video transmission. So no problem over here. We're upside down, there's no problem. Okay, heading towards the 300 meter distance. and heading towards the 400-meter mark, which is the road, and going sideways. So we're actually traversing a little bit further away, and here we get a little bit of static here. So basically right around there, but you get a stronger radiation pattern within that distance because of the circular polarization of the antenna. So all in all, a worthwhile swap from the original dipole antenna for sure. So there you have it, guys, the test flight with the Iching Wizard X140, which I haven't flown for a very long time, with the original dipole antenna with the 4 power output setting, and with the RushFPV's cherry antenna, the right hand circular polarized antenna. So very nice swap out of the antenna, very easy to do, something you can do very quickly. That doesn't cost that much. You get 2 antennas for about 20 bucks, so not a bad deal at all. So I think that'll do for this video, guys. So thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you again next time.